So this is STAR word problem solving strategy. I'm going to teach you guys how to use it today. So STAR stands for search, translate, answer, and review. So I have 3 word problems here today that we're going to figure out. So let's start with search. So search for info, read aloud, highlight keywords, and cross out info that's not important. So for my first example, it would be Dan has 5 pens, Jack has 10 pens, Grace has 14 pens. How many more pens does Grace have than Dan? So in this box, I would have them cross out Jack having 10 pens because Jack doesn't have anything to do with this word problem. And then I would have them highlight or underline whichever tool they have. I would have them highlight Dan has 5 pens, Grace has 14 pens, and then how many more pens does Grace have than Dan? I would have them highlight that also or underline it for the first step. And the second step, I would have them translate that into a word sentence. I would use counters or objects, so I have pens here to help them do that. Otherwise, if I was in a classroom, I would have them use little blocks. And then I would have them actually have this box. So I actually have I have a kind of a visual, and it's kind of color coded so they can see it better, or easier, I should say, to have this box kind of messy to see their train of thought. I would like to see their train of thought on this one. And then in the answer box, the answer, the problem, a couple things to consider are the operations that they'll be using. I want them to think about the steps, show their work, and think about the numbers that they'll be using. So in this box, we're going to actually set up the word problem. So again, I would have them set this up as a subtraction problem and run that through with them. And then once they get to the answer, we can use some manipulatives if we need to. And then I want them to go back and review the answer. So recheck their calculations, reread the question to make sure that it makes sense. So my next 2 problems are Bob has 17 balls. 5 of them are baseballs. 7 of them are basketballs. How many balls aren't baseballs? So in this one, we would cross out the 7 of them are basketballs because it doesn't ask how many of them aren't basketballs. It asks how many of them aren't baseballs. So then I would have them highlight the 17, 5 of them are baseballs, and then how many aren't baseballs. So then in the translate box, I would, again, I would want them to have this a little bit more messy to see their train of thought. So I would write 17, 5, and then I would use their manipulatives along with trying to figure out the problem a little bit. And then answer, so consider the operation, so this would also be subtraction. And then I want them to show their work and kind of how they got their answer. So review, recheck the calculations, reread to make sure the answer makes sense. So I would have them use their manipulative still if they don't think that they did. Go back, reread, make sure that you crossed out the correct lines or things that are kind of throwing them off, or that aren't necessary in the problem. So number 3 is Tony is 5 years old, his brother is 3 years older than him, and his sister is 2 years older than his brother. How old is Tony's brother? So in this one, it's kind of confusing, but we don't need to know how old his sister is. We just want to know how old his brother is. So we would cross out his sister is 2 years older than his brother. That doesn't matter. So then we would highlight that Tony is 5 years old, his brother is 3 years older than him. How old is Tony's brother? So that's just the question right there. So in the translate, we would write down Tony is 5, and then on the other in another space we would write down his brother is +2. So it kind of gives you the operations to bring down into the answer box. in the translate box. So it's kind of like a flow chart a little bit. So we would consider the operations, so plus 5 plus 2 is 7, and then review your answer. Go back, check your question, make sure that it's correct, check your answer, check your operations, and make sure it's all correct. And that's how I would teach them STAR.